A lot of it is mindset. I talked about before how certain groups or people might assume, oh, presence or executive presence is not for me, or I don't see people at the executive level. But presence is for everyone at any level. So I think that mindset shift is really important. I talked to 3 dozen experts for the book, C-suite leaders, business leaders, bestselling authors, etc. One of them was Dory Clark. She's amazing, personal branding expert, Wall Street Journal bestselling author. And she talked about if you say one day, like, oh, I want this to be my brand, or I want people to see my presence as this, it's not going to happen just because you said it once. She said to look for the raindrops, right? So it's not, sometimes we're expecting like the thunderstorm, the rainstorm, and be like, oh yeah, like people see it now. This is established. But we need to start looking for those little moments of, oh, okay, my boss gave me perhaps some feedback that reinforces that what I'm doing is working. Or my peer says something to me or shouts me out in such a way where I'm realizing, oh, okay, people are starting to notice that this is how I want to be perceived. And so I think when you look for those raindrops, that can be a really helpful strategy as well. And as I say in the book, it's really about that consistency and building it over time.
Welcome to another episode of Chief Influencer. I'm your host, Anthony Shop, co-founder of Social Driver. Let's face it, Washington is the center of influence in the US and arguably in the world. Chief Influencer features leaders who have figured out how to break through in today's fragmented and fast-changing environment. Social Driver teamed up with the Communications Board and the George Washington University College of Professional Studies to recognize these incredible leaders as chief influencers and highlight how they inspire and influence others.
Lorraine K is the best-selling author of Unforgettable Presence, Get Seen, Gain Influence, and Catapult Your Career. It's a powerhouse guide to building visibility and impact in today's competitive workplace. She's also an award-winning keynote speaker and LinkedIn top voice recognized for her expertise in workplace communication and executive presence. Now, before we dive in, though, I want to tell you 3 things that I think you should know about today's guest before we get into the show. First and foremost, Lorraine is present powerhouse. She has worked with top-tier organizations like Amazon, Zoom, McKinsey, and Cisco with their teams as well as with leaders themselves to really transform how they show up. Her frameworks are grounded in real-world application and designed for immediate impact, helping professionals go from invisible to unforgettable. Number 2, Lorraine is a trusted voice in the modern workplace. With a following of hundreds of thousands on LinkedIn and features like CNBC, Bloomberg, Fast Company, she truly is recognized now as the authority on communication, confidence, and influence. Her insights have shaped how professionals at every level really communicate with impact, build strategic relationships, and elevate their careers. But number 3, and this is really the most important thing I want you to know about Lorraine, she has walked the walk. A self-described, shy, and overlooked introvert, I have a hard time saying those words out loud after I've been listening to you in the audiobook so many times.
Yeah.
But I will take you at your word. I'll take you at your word. Lorraine built her career as a founding editor at LinkedIn and Prezi, shaping core products like the LinkedIn Daily Rundown and newsletters. And today, she teaches at Stanford and LinkedIn Learning as well, and she keynotes for audiences all around the globe. So, Lorraine, you've been called many things. You've been called editor, educator, executive coach, keynote speaker, LinkedIn legend. But today, we're really excited to be able to call you a chief influencer.
Well, I'm so excited to be here, and I will gladly take on that title.
Wonderful. Well, welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
So what I thought we'd do today is try to take themes that I know you often talk to audiences about and try to tie them back to some of the themes that we've heard over several of our chief influencer podcasts. So let's dive right in. You know, in past episodes of Chief Influencer, guests like Edna Kane Williams and Tim Coetzee have emphasized that authenticity and self-awareness and deep listening, these are really sort of foundational to influence. Now, you use the term presence as a unifying concept. So, how do you define presence, and why is it so important for professionals really at every stage in their career?
With this book, I am really trying to redefine what exactly presence means. And I'll start off by sharing my own story of how I realized this was so important. So I was a founding editor at LinkedIn. I was someone who really wanted to get promoted, really advance throughout the company. And what ended up happening is I worked really hard. I worked on high priority, high visibility projects. I was well liked by my peers. And so by all accounts on paper, you would think, oh yeah, these are the steps, these are the things you need to do in order to get promoted. And what ended up happening is I pushed really hard. I was frustrated. I really wanted this for myself, and it just didn't end up happening. And it was only after I left LinkedIn after 6 years where I had that space to really reflect and to think about what went wrong. What could I have done differently? So I talked to mentors, I talked to peers, and I realized that a big thing that I was missing in my role at LinkedIn was presence, and presence more so in terms of how I was being seen. And then what ended up happening is a few months later, COVID. And so we all went virtual.
Mm.
And I realized, oh, presence is not just about how we're being seen, but where we're being seen. Are we being seen by the right people at the right times in the right places? Oh, presence can mean LinkedIn presence. It can mean your video presence. It can mean how you're showing up in an email, in a chat channel. And I realized that presence is not just this one big thing. I know a lot of us think presence equals executive presence, and how we show up in a room and we're a certain seniority level and it's a high stakes situation. But I realized that, those situations they're not coming around all the time. And so presence is really something that should and can be worked on through all points in your career, through the smaller touch points that you have in a given day that really build up your consistency and your brand over time.
Well, you also talk about people being the CEO of their career. So, how can we inject more intentionality into our everyday decisions and our professional path and really truly be that CEO?
This is a really big mindset shift that changed the trajectory of my career. When I was starting off and during my time at LinkedIn, I was very much a passive passenger. So I assumed certain things would happen or certain outcomes would be there because of what I did. So for example, oh yes, if I work really hard, I will eventually be rewarded. Or oh, I only need to network when it's when I need something, right? It's not something that you should be building up over time throughout your entire career. Or, oh yeah, I've been here for quite a few years now. It's bound to lead to a promotion. All of these things were just letting things happen to me, and it wasn't proactive. And as you mentioned, like intentionality is a big theme throughout the book, and becoming the CEO of my own career really changed my outlook in terms of realizing that, oh, I actually can have a positive outcome and can control some of these things. So instead of just assuming promotion time, annual reviews, that my manager will put me up for promotion, oh, I can ask about that promotion and let them know I want it. And oh, I can plan for this and let them know 6 months in advance. And oh, I can also learn who's going to be in the room and talk to those people and let them know about my goals. So there's a lot more control that we have than I think people realize. And when we approach our careers with that proactivity, with that, certain level of intensity of like, okay, I'm reaching this goal or I want this goal and I'm going to take the steps to get there, you get better outcomes.
If you really read through the book, it's really kind of a manual. And really, with so many, you have a wonderful online toolkit that comes with the book with so many templates and suggestions and things that you can really take and put to use in your daily life. Can you talk a little bit about some of those like big key ahas that you share in the book that really do enable people to be the CEO of their own career? I mean, the one that sticks with me a lot that I've been using today in a couple of webinars I've been on is the way you introduce yourself. Can you share a little bit more about that? Maybe a couple of other examples?
Sure. Yeah. So that's one of my favorites because we're all introducing ourselves. We're all on so many calls. And so what happens on a lot of calls or even in person, we are on autopilot small talk. And what ends up happening is we will ask each other questions that we already know the answer to, and that doesn't require the other person to think at all. So we were to get on a call and you ask me how am I doing? And I'm going to say, good. How about you? And you're going to say, good. And then the conversation, like, where do we take it from there? And we're not learning much about each other, right? We're not developing a connection. And small talk, it gets a bad rap because we're doing it on autopilot, but it is still one of the best ways that we can build rapport and to get to know one another. So one concept that I talk about throughout the book is conversational threading. So how can we introduce additional threads to the conversation, both in terms by asking more interesting questions, but then also giving a little bit more with your answers. So instead, you might ask me, how am I doing today? Or maybe you even ask me, what was the highlight of your day today? Oh, okay, now I actually have to pause and think for a second about my day and figure out, okay, what was something good? So you're also setting the call off on a positive tone, right? So I'm thinking of something positive. And instead of saying, oh, I got to have an extra long lunch break today, I might talk about the lunch break. I might talk about that gave me the chance to listen to my favorite podcast. And I got to see some really nice weather or some like animals like on the water or something. And now you have 3 different threads that you can pull on to ask me for more details, to dig in, to learn a little bit more about me and my interests. So a lot of conversations start or stop too early. Another thing related to that, as you mentioned, is the introduction piece of things. And how do we talk about ourselves and, again, connect with other folks is with this concept that I talk about called a UPI, a unique and powerful introduction. And so many of us, introductions just become a throwaway moment. I don't know why, but we take like 5 seconds to introduce ourselves. But when we can add a little bit more, talk about the goals that we have or what we're excited about, or even simply explain, like not just throwing out a title, but exactly is it that we do? That allows us, again, to connect with each other, and you appear more confident, more personable, and more competent as well.
Great. Well, you also talk a lot in the book about LinkedIn, of course, given your background, but also the way you really are able to use it for your own executive presence. So tell us a little bit about why is LinkedIn so it's an essential tool really in building influence and visibility, and how does it connect back to that idea of presence?
Or, well, I'm glad we're now connected on LinkedIn as of the other day, which is excellent. And LinkedIn is not just a job site anymore. LinkedIn has really become our virtual landing page, our virtual water cooler, and really our virtual office, the ultimate virtual office, as I like to say. And so presence is a big piece of, where are you being seen? We want to be seen at the office. And LinkedIn is so powerful because it allows you to create an unforgettable presence, to create a positive impression of yourself without ever having to talk to someone, which is pretty amazing, right? So someone comes to my LinkedIn, they say I have a great LinkedIn presence. Wow, I've never even met you before, but they have a positive perception of me. LinkedIn is also a really fantastic way to stay top of mind, develop your thought leadership, right? Get introduced to new opportunities. So even if you're happy in your job, maybe someone wants you to speak, someone wants to interview you for a podcast. There's so much possibility there. And even beyond that, the relationships you can build. I've met many friends, many collaborators through LinkedIn. And when you have a strong LinkedIn presence, I like to say that I think it opens the doors to meet pretty much anyone who you want, right? Like they're going to go to your profile, do a quick scan, see what you're about. And usually if you look legitimate, they're going to accept if you have a nice message to go alongside it. So just so much possibility on there. And a lot of people still are only seeing it as a job site.
You're right. And a lot of people, have very little information, just the very bare bones up on their LinkedIn site. And so I'm wondering, for those listening on the podcast today that maybe you're kind of just at that stage in LinkedIn, can you give them some 3 things that they should do or look at or think about right now on their LinkedIn profile page to really amp it up, knowing that they're going to run out and get that book and get to that toolkit because you have extra sets of advice and templates and other things that are outside of the book on your toolkit as well. There's a lot to learn about LinkedIn from you. So
There
can
it
you
is.
do
Yeah.
that 3 today?
Of course. So let's see, there's so many things you can do, but I'll give you maybe like the 3 easiest to fix. So the first, a good profile picture. And not just a good profile picture, but there's some strategy behind it. So I was just doing a LinkedIn live audit earlier today for some folks. And what you see a lot is in people's profile pictures, they're showing too much of their body. What ends up happening on mobile is the picture is so small, so it's really hard to see. So you want to zoom in closer to your face, have your face take up most of that circle. And then your background photo, also pretty much the biggest real estate on your LinkedIn profile. I call it a billboard. So many people are still using the default LinkedIn banner, or they're uploading the naturescape photo. Now, unless you are the photographer who took that photo, I'm not really learning much about you, right? Like, we want people to look at that photo and have an understanding of what we're about, what we can offer, what is our value. So adding a background photo can be a very powerful thing. And then the third, the headline. Again, a lot of people, job title at company. Yes, you can include that and should include that, but you have quite a few characters, 220 characters to fill out there for a reason. If you add more keywords of things that you want to be known for, discovered for, this helps with searchability and discoverability within the LinkedIn ecosystem, also on Google, which I think a lot of people don't realize. So making sure you flesh that out, that is going to be really powerful in being found by the right people.
Now those are such great things to suggest, I think, for the audience. But as I said, there's so much more in the book. I was almost regretting buying the audiobook because I was thinking I'm just driving and there's so many things I want to be taking notes on. But I was really grateful to learn about the toolkit to check that out. But I do want to kind of get also the story, behind the book. You do so many different things to sort of spread awareness, and you use lots of different channels to do that about presence. I kind of want to know, first of all, why a book? And tell us a little bit about the story about how the audiobook also happened. But then I'd also like to hear what you would like audiences to really get out of the book. Sort of those sort of three pieces.
Sure. So writing a book was not on my vision board at all. What ended up happening was I launched my first LinkedIn learning course, and then my former colleague from my SlideShare/LinkedIn days, Arun, he congratulated me, he sent me a note on LinkedIn, and then he made this kind of joke like, oh, when's the book coming out? And that was the first time where he really planted that seed, and I thought, oh, that does kind of make sense. Like, I'm publishing content and I like teaching and helping people. Yeah, a book would be kind of a cool thing to do. And so I stored that idea away and ended up getting laid off, I think, like a month or two after that. And so I had to decide, do I want to apply for another job or start my own company? Ended up starting my own company, again, with the idea of, okay, a book will happen at some point. I'm not sure when yet. And about a year into my company, a publisher reached out, Wiley. And then after they reached out, a few more reached out. And I figured, this is the universe telling me it's time. Of course, you feel imposter syndrome and unsure, like, is this the right time? Like, my business is so new, all of these things that run through your head. But yeah, I wanted to capitalize on the moment. I wanted to help more people. And I have heard from many authors that a book not only adds credibility, but people like having that takeaway, right? I'm posting on LinkedIn every day. I have a newsletter, this and that. But the book is really a very organized, structured way to get a lot of my ideas, a lot of my best practices. So to me, I think that was something that was exciting. Like, oh, I can kind of package it up. And if people want to learn about me, like, here's the one place you can go to kind of, sample all the things that I know about and that I love talking about. And so, yeah, that's how the book came to be.
Well, and kudos to you, really, it's not very usual for a publisher to reach out and say, will you write us a book?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to really be known in your field, right, for doing that. And I think all of those different things that you did to sort of cultivate a presence, then kind of ironically brought them to come to you and say, will you write the book on presence? So I think that's a great testimony to your thought leadership in this area.
I appreciate that. And it's such a good call out too. Like, it was my LinkedIn presence. They found me on LinkedIn. So there's an opportunity, if anyone out there wants to write a book, create a strong LinkedIn presence.
Exactly. And it's also a good note to publishers if you're kind of hunting around for the good next book, especially in terms of business and workplace culture and best practices. LinkedIn is a great place and a great place to look for that. Talk a little bit about the audiobook experience.
Oh, yes. So the audiobook was interesting because they work with an outside vendor, and the outside vendor didn't want me to record it initially. And I was, talking about advocating for yourself. I talk about that a lot in the book. I was like, no, I need to be the one to read it. I record videos. People see me speak. It needs to be consistent. It's going to be so weird if I'm not the one speaking. And so, like I talk about in the book, like I didn't just say it once that I wanted to record the audiobook. I kept bringing it up. I was persistent and consistent with it. I recorded samples, and then eventually they were like, okay, you can record the audiobook. And that usually takes 4 to 5 days to record, especially for first-time authors. I was so pleased that I was able to do it in 2 days because it is quite a process. I think really the secret there is you can't get too caught up or frustrated with yourself if you stumble over a word. You just have to redo it, keep going, and not get in your head about it. So that was actually I enjoyed it. I got a little bit psyched out from hearing from other authors how tough it is, but I thought it was actually pretty fun.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. As I said, you've been my partner, commuting to work the last couple of days, and I've really enjoyed it. But that's something I really enjoy about audiobooks. So I'm so glad that you pushed for that, because I know
Notice that.
it
Yeah.
is hard for many authors to actually produce in that way. But you're absolutely right. Seeing you on video, hearing that authentic voice, you would expect that would have been one of the benefits of listening to the audiobook, is to kind of have, you there and you present to talk about presence. So I'm so glad you pushed for that. When you were sitting down, to write this book, what did you kind of hope or expect someone would get out of it? What would how you talk about, like, think about before the meeting, what you think people, how they're
Yeah.
thinking and how they're
Yep.
feeling,
Yep.
and after, walk me through that process.
I really it was really important for me to create a book that was going to help people, and as you mentioned, I am very practical and tactical with everything that I create because I want people to be able to take action in the moment or be able to do something right after they're done reading. And so that was really important to me. I have been so floored and just grateful for the messages that I've been receiving. It's so cool to see someone like you have no idea how they found the book. You've never seen them online before, and they're reaching out with messages about how it's helped their team, or they're going to buy it for their team, or how someone just messaged me the other day. She's like, "Oh, I led like a more impactful meeting. Like people actually were engaging this time, and that's never happened before." So hearing those stories, I didn't even expect that, but hearing all those stories, I think has been the most special part. But really, I wanted people to not have to make the same mistakes I did and go through the challenges that I did. It's really the book that I wish I had had when I was in my 20s trying to climb the corporate ladder. And I'm just so grateful that it's out in the world and helping people.
Oh, that's really great to hear, because I do think it's making that impact.
Mhm.
In particular, what I really like about the book is that you really dig into sort of hybrid and remote workplace issues. So many professionals like myself are struggling to be seen and heard in a remote or a type of hybrid environment. So, what advice do you have for cultivating authentic visibility in this medium?
It's important to remember, especially in a hybrid workplace, video is always going to be part of our lives. So, of course, there's things that you can do in person, but I think a lot of people don't give enough credit to video. It's sort of like the worst option between the two. But I think video is so powerful. It can really become someone's superpower. And so, to have a strong video presence, to have it represent how you want to be seen, and you're showing up more professionally, you're going to look more competent. It's going to make you more confident if you know that you're showing up well. I think that's such a powerful thing. And because not a lot of people are, even after all these years, are not very intentional about their video presence. They're not very intentional about how they are delivering presentations virtually or how they're engaging with the person on the other side of the camera. When you can be that person, it goes a really long way. And again, like video is not going away. So if we can learn it, if we can use it to our advantage, it's going to be one of the things that helps us stand out, as you say, in this very disjointed, kind of distracted world where everyone's working from different places.
Well, without giving too much of the book and the toolkit away, could you give us just a couple of pieces of advice about how to show it better?
Yeah, of course. So I have another framework for video presence. It's called the T method, and it stands for tech, energy, and aesthetics. And these are the three things to start thinking about anytime before you jump onto a call. So tech means having the right hardware, having the right software, right? So people can hear and see you clearly. Energy, we touched on this earlier, but how are you showing up on the call? It's not just, am I awake and do I look alert? But it's about, okay, how am I engaging with you? Am I making the eye contact and connecting with you? Am I using my hands and my body language to show that I'm excited about what I'm talking about? So all of those things are part of energy. And then aesthetics. Am I lit well? What does my environment look like, right? Both the background and the foreground. We now can take advantage of the foreground, right? We don't have so much space to make an impression, but we can take advantage of every piece of space that we have. Are we wearing clothes that blend into our background? I commented on your blazer earlier. I like the color you're popping on camera, and so I appreciated that. And so, yeah, it's a decent number of things to fix, but it's not hard. It just takes a little bit of time and then just taking it step by step and you'll get there.
Yeah, those are great pieces of advice. Next, I'd like to kind of dig in a little bit to this idea of listening and storytelling. So many of our recent chief influencer guests have highlighted the power of listening and storytelling, especially in terms of building trust and credibility. How do those skills really intersect with presence and personal brand, and how can professionals sharpen them?
Important. I mean, listening is part of presence and being present in the moment. So that's sort of a third bonus definition around presence. But I think the storytelling is extra key, right? Whether we are giving a presentation, whether we are developing our brand, I think especially as it pertains to our brand and our brand is something that we don't think about too much. And I think, it's chapter 1 of the book for a reason. So I talk about our career brand. And what that is our personal brand, which is essentially our reputation. Now, I call it a career brand because personal brand has negative connotations to it sometimes. People think, oh, I have to be really loud or marketing myself all the time. But what it is a brand in service of helping you grow your career. And if you think of it as your reputation, okay, we all have a reputation, right? We all have a brand already. So how are we going to use storytelling? How are we going to interact with others, LinkedIn, et cetera, all the touch points, again, that we have in a given day, so that we are strengthening, forming, curating our brand instead of leaving it to chance or letting others decide it for us. So I think it's extremely critical, and our brand is something that we need to start really working on as soon as we can, right? It will shift and grow as our careers change, but we need to think about it because I talked about that story at LinkedIn. People probably saw me as hard worker, good at executing, positive attitude, all good things. But if I wanted to be seen as a leader, probably needed to be more strategic, cross-functional collaborator, visionary, right? So there was a disconnect there. And if I had known, I would have been able to make the leap a little bit better. But, now I know the importance of a brand and now your audience will too.
Oh, well, thanks for sharing that with everyone. Presence is not just something you can read in a book necessarily and go out and execute perfectly the next day. And so I really like for you to share a little bit about, like, what are some of the barriers to presence, having really good, strong presence, especially in a consistent way? And how can you kind of get better at the consistency and the impact over time?
A lot of it is mindset. I talked about before how certain groups or people might assume, oh, presence or executive presence is not for me, or I don't see people at the executive level. But presence is for everyone at any level. So I think that mindset shift is really important. I talked to 36 experts for the book, C-suite leaders, business leaders, bestselling authors, etc. One of them was Dory Clark. She's amazing, personal branding expert, Wall Street Journal bestselling author. And she talked about, this was in the sense of a brand, but I think it applies well to presence as well, in that if you say one day, like, oh, I want this to be my brand, or I want people to see my presence as this, it's not going to happen just because you said it once. She said to look for the raindrops, right? So it's not, sometimes we're expecting like the thunderstorm, the rainstorm, and be like, oh yeah, like people see it now. This is established. But we need to start looking for those little moments of, oh, okay, my boss gave me perhaps some feedback that reinforces that what I'm doing is working. Or my peer says something to me or shouts me out in such a way where I'm realizing, oh, okay, people are starting to notice that this is how I want to be perceived. And so I think when you look for those raindrops, that can be a really helpful strategy as well. Like you said, it's not just like one boom moment and it's happened, but, and as I say in the book, it's really about that consistency and building it over time.
So I said at the top of the podcast, you sort of self-identify as an introvert. And so much of presence is really, or at least the way most people think about it, it's very much, very highly correlated with extroversion. So for those of us that are introverts, do you have hope? Do you have advice for how we can all have a better executive presence on and more consistently in our day?
Yeah, well, hopefully people can see that as possible. I am introverted. And, it's really about energy management and then also realizing what your superpowers are. So I do touch on the experiences of introverts throughout the book because it's important to me that others sort of understand how they can build their presence in a world, like you said, that can feel like it's made for the loud extroverts out there. So introverts have a lot of superpowers that we don't necessarily think of or are not so obvious. So one of the ones that I really like to talk about is that introverts are very well suited for public speaking, usually a more controlled public speaking environment. And the reason for this is because introverts are great at building relationships, right? So they're empathetic. They can kind of like feel how the audience is feeling. They're very thoughtful. They love preparing. They're a great writers, so they can kind of map out exactly, what they want to say. And I think that's like usually kind of a surprise when introverts hear me say that because they think they need to be extroverted. But no, it's about understanding your energy. Okay, maybe you're not going to talk to 20 people that day before you present, but you'll be by yourself. And then you'll present and you'll do a great job. And then you manage your energy again afterwards. Related to that, I mentioned the writing piece. Wow, there's so many chats going back and forth in a given day, right? Slack, Teams, etc. For you to be able to clearly and concisely write your message, write maybe the executive summary at the top, just really connect the dots and be really clear with your communication. That is something that I think is that companies are struggling with, right? Because we're all so go, go, go. We're not taking that time to really think about our message and our communication. So that's another excellent strength that introverts have.
Yeah, I love the suggestion in the book about, introverts, if you've been in a meeting and you just haven't had the energy or found sort of the space on the floor to say your thoughts, your superpower is that you've been sitting back and listening, absorbing, and synthesizing the meeting. So
Yep.
you can kind of, contribute to the conversation after the meeting, bringing it all together in an email to everyone that's there. And I think that can really be an invaluable role for people on teams that with that type of a personality profile. So I thought that was really great. I kind of wanted to also talk a little bit to you about reciprocity of influence. Alan Goldston on the podcast talked about the two-way nature of influence. It's not all just one way. How we shape people shapes us. So how do you think that kind of mutual influence plays out in your own work?
So much. In the book, I talk about the RAVE model for influence. So relationships, appearances, visibility, expertise. And the relationships piece is first because in our workplaces and even just, everyday life, like relationships are the cornerstone, the foundation of everything that we do. And so to have that reciprocity, to go into conversations with more of a giving mindset versus I'm here to take or I need something, that is so powerful. And influence inherently involves, right, influencing someone else. So there's always going to be someone there. And so how can we really build those relationships thoughtfully at work? We talked about some strategies earlier. How can we manage up more effectively and take time to get to know each other as people? Again, we don't have to get so personal and in the weeds, but again, with this go, go, go nature of our workplaces now, people sometimes don't stop and it is very transactional. But really, when you get to know each other as humans, that's where the magic happens.
No, I think that's so true. You sort of think about influence kind of evolving in your own life over time. How has your own understanding of influence sort of changed over the course of your career? And what does it mean for you today?
Influence can also, like presence and executive presence, feel like kind of nebulous sometimes. So that is one of the reasons why I created that framework. And I always knew people who had influence, like you see them around the office, but early on I didn't know that it was influence. Like that was something that you should strive for. And so I think about this one coworker, and she was someone who just always seemed to know what was going on with, other parts of the company. People, of course, liked her as a person. She was wonderful at advocating for herself and kind of hyping up her group and being like, okay, this is, the project that we just did, and here are the takeaways and the learnings. And so that was really helpful for me to see that model, because I think initially if I would have thought about influence, I would have just maybe thought of, oh, it's people kind of willing to do things for you if you ask for it. But really it's about how to get people bought in, how to make them feel like we're all in this together, how to know how to talk about your work, which is very, very important for visibility and for other people to even, again, know who you are in the first place. So I think it became more nuanced, and I realized that there was a lot more to it as I got older, versus just kind of like maybe more of that like schmoozing type of, dynamic.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you on that one. That's an example of how someone's influenced you. Do you have some chief influencers in your life that you'd like to share with the audience?
Oh my gosh, so many. I talk in the book about this concept called mentorship moments. And I say that because I have so many mentors who I would consider chief influencers in my life, people who have really impacted me, taught me things, got me to where I am today. But sometimes I think the idea of a mentor can feel so formal or like such this big to do, right? Like, oh, I gotta ask and kind of like coordinate and this and that. But I like the idea of mentorship moments because I do have many chief influencers in my life and people who I can simply ask, right? I know what their area of expertise is, and because we've built that relationship, because I've also given just like they've given to me, they're more than happy to share their experience or their advice. So I have a few public speaking mentors. I have people I turn to for business questions. I have many peers who are doing similar work that I am. So I think one of the best parts about starting my own business was even how my network expanded even bigger. Because while I was at LinkedIn, while I was at Prezi, I still worked a lot with external leaders. But I feel like ever since going off on my own, it's just grown that much bigger. So that's been a really special part.
Oh, that's not surprising, but it is really great to hear. Well, I know you're also a teacher, and even a professor. So I'd love to hear about how that change of it's similar and related, but it's also got different components, doesn't it? When you kind of move from influence and really trying to share smaller bits of learning to really putting it together in a whole course and stretching that narrative over a longer learning experience, and then measuring and assuring that learning. How has been that transition to the classroom for you?
I love that question. I've never gotten asked that before. It was it was quite intimidating, to be honest, because I had done primarily 1 hour keynote, 1 hour training
Yeah.
sessions. And when I had this opportunity to teach at Stanford, I was so nervous because I was like, I've never done more than an hour's worth of content
Yeah.
at times. And obviously it's more than that. So, what really helped me for that first iteration of the course was finding someone who had expertise in L&D, who has built out trainings before. So I think that's a great lesson. If you feel like you're lacking some confidence or not quite sure, find the expert to help you. And then over the course of my career, I'd made a few, big steps and big leaps that have helped me really grow my confidence. And so when you can start doing that, even when imposter syndrome perhaps sneaks in, to know that you have that data of, oh, I tried that new thing before and it worked out, and I've done this many times now, that
Yeah.
actually gave me a lot of confidence to say, okay, just because I haven't done this before doesn't mean I cannot do it. And it ended up being one of the, an above average rated class compared to the other courses that semester. So yeah, I did it and I keep improving and I'm always asking for feedback and doing quick polls like how helpful was this class? So I think that feedback loop and that iteration is also really key.
Have you found your situations in which your students have actually taught you?
It is always really helpful to hear the challenges that students have. And yeah, sometimes they'll give me advice as well. But just hearing their stories, hearing, oh, you're struggling with this, you can it helps you become a better teacher because then you can come up with better answers, better strategies. You start ruminating outside of class. You're like, oh, here's
Yeah.
another idea. And so, yeah, hearing those stories like directly from the people who are experiencing the challenges, that's always helpful because otherwise it gets kind of theoretical. And I talked about this in the with like executive communications. It's like I know what I want to talk about and what I think is helpful, but you have to understand who your audience is and
Mhm.
make sure that what you're delivering is actually stuff that they care about.
It's also a good way to sort of test your own hypotheses about how the world works, right?
For
Because it can
sure.
work in a certain way in many or most contexts, but then there's always that particular person or situation or industry or organizational context in which maybe the framework doesn't work quite as well. But then it forces you to think about the framework and sometimes improve the framework. So a feedback
Sure.
loop. It's one of the reasons why, it's so fun to see practitioners like yourself come into the classroom and share your experience with others. And it's that sort of exchange of practitioner experience where where a lot of real magic happens.
Yeah, that's a great call out. And then you also get a sense of, okay, what's really resonating? Does this framework work? Does this
Right.
exercise work? Yeah.
No, exactly. And that's what we, particularly in continuing study school, like where you teach and where I am, that is, it's fun to sit in classrooms and listen
Yeah.
to those with a lot of workplace experience, talking to those that maybe are newer or in a new organizational environment, kind of riffing off of one another. That it's just really, it's really a lot of fun. So I'm so glad that you're also getting back in the classroom as well. But of course, you also have quite a set of LinkedIn learning courses. So I know after listening to this podcast, I hope they do. They're going to rush out and get that book
Yeah.
and start digging into the toolkit. But I also hope that they look up some of your courses
Mm.
on LinkedIn Learning. I know that I've assigned them to my son.
Oh, no.
So could you share a little bit with the audience about what are some of your favorites and why on your LinkedIn Learning set of courses?
Yeah, so LinkedIn Learning is different than my Stanford course because it's asynchronous, so it's recorded one way. But an excellent style of learning as well. Some of my most popular, I just checked this the other day. There's a new-ish one on how to create more collaboration amongst teams that has been quite popular, which I'm not surprised about because I know there's been a lot of change happening at companies and people want to improve that skill. How to give and receive feedback, also a popular one, which I'm happy to see. I have 19 courses out and my 20th is on the way. So there's a lot of different options for people, various career leadership management topics to check out. And I would say maybe the third one, how to speak so others will listen, is quite popular as well.
Mhm. Well, I have so enjoyed our conversation today, but before we wrap up, could you tell us, are you willing to share what comes next for you? What are you planning on next in your career?
We're still promoting this book, and I know some people ask me about when's book 2 coming out. Not sure yet. But yeah, we're getting the book out there. Still speaking to a lot of companies. I've been doing a lot of fireside chats in the Bay Area and then also in other states as well, and book signings as well, which has been really fun. I'm thinking about a master class or some sort of course connected to the book. So I think that's going to be the next stage of my business. So stay tuned if you enjoy the book and want to keep learning from me. I'm very excited to experiment with that.
Well, congratulations on being a chief influencer. And thank you so much with sharing with all of us how you have really influenced and led with great presence.
Thank you.
Chief Influencer is a production of Social Driver. We help clients transform complexity into clarity with people-centered strategies. Whether you're looking to elevate the influence of your brand or of your leaders, check out socialdriver.com to learn more. For show notes or to nominate a guest, visit us at chiefinfluencer.org or follow Chief Influencer on LinkedIn.